Why, hello, and greetings, my fellow ghouls, goblins, and ghosts. I bid you welcome to the Festival of Samhain Horror Podcast. Dripping with blood, gore, ghosts, and demons, we are sure to thrill and chill you with a scary good time. And just in case you're new to the show, hi, my name is Purgatory, the Queen of Samhain. Welcome to my catacombs of creepiness. Okay, let's get started, everyone. Also, apologies on the episode being a few days late. I was sick for a couple of days, but I'm here now, and that just means you'll get not one, but 2 episodes this week. Anyway, welcome to Zombie Week of 61 Days of Halloween, and this evening I will be talking a little bit about zombies and cinema. Zombie history, that is. The history of zombies in cinema. Very brief history, if you will. It's going to be very brief, but available on my Patreon. I have a full 2-part article posted, written by me. Okay, zombie history. Let's start at the beginning, shall we? And zombies, whether you love or hate them, they've always been a big staple of the horror genre. Zombies have been a part of cinema since the early 1930s. For those of you who didn't know, they didn't start out being the flesh-eating zombies that we're familiar with today when we think of George A. Romero's Living Dead saga or Robert Kirkman's The Walking Dead comic/television series. Zombies were much more docile and had a lot to do with the world of magic and voodoo starting out. But before we start getting into all that, what is a zombie? Well, there are a couple of definitions. The definition of zombie is a willless, speechless human or corpse said to be revived by witchcraft or voodoo, especially in African or Caribbean religions, or a corpse that has returned from beyond the grave hungry for human flesh. These creatures are often reanimated through chemical contamination of some sort or disease and or infection. To understand the zombie progression in cinema, we must dive into the history of zombies in cinema by going back to the very beginning. And in going back to the very beginning of zombie films, we must recognize the very first feature-length zombie film ever made, White Zombie, 1932, directed by Victor Halperin and written by Garnett Weston. This film starred Bela Lugosi, Dracula, 1931, and the film itself, though, is based on a novel published in 1929 titled The Magic Island by William Seabrook. The novel itself is said to be based on an account of William Seabrook's experiences in Haiti or something like that. I don't know much about that. You guys can look into that. That's just what he said. The Magic Island is considered the very first popular English language literature that describes the concept of a quote-unquote zombie. Now, you would probably say that White Zombie is most likely only loosely based on the Magic Island, but it is fascinating to think about. The story of White Zombie centers around an evil man named Murder Legendre, played by Bela Lugosi, who's known as a menacing master, like a master of making zombies or a voodoo master, I'm not sure. And a man, Charles Beaumont, is in love with a woman named Madeline Short and is devastated to find out that she is married to another man or is about to become married to another man. With his heart broken and a head full of rage, he goes to see Murder Legendre to ask for his help, and together they come up with an evil plan, which is to kill Madeline and bring her back as a zombie so that she could be his to control and his alone. Murder Legendre, however, goes against Charles Beaumont and decides he wants Madeline for himself. Not only is White Zombie considered to be the first feature-length zombie film, but it's also considered to be the archetype and blueprint for a lot of zombie films to come. If it wasn't for White Zombie, we wouldn't have a lot of zombie films we have today. Because after the release of White Zombie, there have been more and more voodoo zombie films to come, including the loose sequel released in 1936 called Revolt of the Zombies. And I say loose sequel because it is not directly connected to White Zombie, but was made by the same creators. The film centers around a Cambodian priest who possesses the ability to turn men into mindless zombies with an ancient formula. The priest decides to help the French during World War I by creating an army of the undead, so an international expedition is set to stop the priest before it is too late. Well, because of the success of White Zombie, that's why Revolt of the Zombies 1936 was created. Now, the zombie craze was prominent, and it was so prominent that even a few horror comedy zombie films were made, such as The Ghostbreakers, 1940, directed by George Marshall, and featured both ghosts and zombies haunting an estate. The second horror comedy, which featured only zombies, was released exactly a year later, and that was called King of the Zombies, 1941, about a Capel's XC-12 aircraft that was flying between Cuba and Puerto Rico, crashing on a remote island after being blown off course. The inhabitants of the aircraft then had to take refuge in a mansion on the island that was occupied by a man who used voodoo rites to turn men into zombies. Both The Ghostbreakers 1940 and King of the Zombies 1941 go in tangent with each other, even though they aren't connected in any way. I have seen King of the Zombies, but I have never seen The Ghostbreakers. Then, of course, we have I Walked with a Zombie, and that came out in 1943. We've had a 2-year break introducing comedy horror zombies to the mix, but now it's time to get serious again. I Walked with a Zombie 1943 was directed by Jacques Tourneur and written by both Kurt Siodmak and Ardell Ray. It told the story of a nurse who was hired to care for a woman on a sugar plantation named Jessica Holland, who suffered from a bizarre condition but ends up uncovering the family's sinister secrets after getting drawn to the dark culture of voodoo and mysticism. Following I Walk with the Zombie, we had Zombies of Moratau, 1957. That one is pretty unique because it features a group of treasure hunters who are after a legendary box of diamonds that are aboard a sunken ship, but little did they know that this sunken ship was guarded by undead crewmen of the ship, and they were zombies. And it kind of gives like the whole underwater zombie thing. Like if you've seen Lucio Fulci's 1979 film Zombies, there is a zombie that lives underwater who attacks a girl swimming and then inevitably gets into a fight with a shark, but that's for another discussion. And then we have Plan 9 from Outer Space, 1959. And some honorable mentions include Teenage Zombies 1959, Invasion of the Zombies 1962, Castle of the Living Dead 1964, I Eat Your Skin 1964, The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies 1964, The Last Man on Earth, Cemetery of the Living Dead, and so on and so forth. Zombies have been popular in the horror genre for quite some time, that is, until one man came along and changed the face of zombies and what we think of when we hear the word zombie forever. Who is that man? Those of you who already know. Why, none other than George A. Romero, of course. If you didn't already know, George A. Romero basically invented the flesh-eating zombie subgenre of horror. Voodoo zombies became a thing of the past. Voodoo was out, flesh-eating was in, and it all started with George's infamous zombie classic, even though he didn't really call them he didn't call them zombies at all. In Night of the Living Dead 1968 is what I'm talking about. They weren't called zombies. They were referred to as flesh-eating ghouls. In fact, it never really occurred to him to use the word zombie, but, they basically were like zombies. They were like reanimated dead people, but the only difference is they ate the living. Regardless, they were zombies, plain and simple, just a new era and concept of zombies. Night of the Living Dead 1968 became so popular that it spawned a whole new era of these type of zombies and other types of zombies for that matter. The sky was the limit for horror filmmakers. You could just do so much with them. You could do so much with zombies. It's just something that you don't have to be afraid to get creative with. And that's one of the things that I love about zombie films is you could do so much with them. You can, create your own zombie virus. You can, it could go a sci-fi route to where, like, it's like Night of the Comet and they turn into zombies as a result of, I think it was radiation or something to do with the comet when it crashed. But you could do so much. Personally, my favorite zombie film of all time will always be Night of the Living Dead because it was the first horror film I ever watched. But I'm going to have to give so much love to Dawn of the Dead 1978, aka Zombie in Italy, Zombi, just because of how colorful it is and how personal it is to me. I have a personal connection with Dawn of the Dead. And of course you have Tom Savini gracing us with his infamous artistry, and that's just amazing. I love his effects, and if you're a horror fan, you more than likely love his effects too. But if you don't know who Tom Savini is, please look him up. He is amazing. He's done so much. All right, getting off topic a little bit. I mentioned this earlier. A year later, after Dawn of the Dead's release, the unofficial sequel to Dawn of the Dead emerged. This film was titled Zombie 2, Zombi 2, 1979, or Lucio Fulci's Zombie. And I'm going to get into that a little bit. The reason why I say this is an unofficial sequel is because Dawn of the Dead 1978 was released in Italy under the name Zombie, like I mentioned before. One of the producers of Dawn of the Dead, Fabrizio De Angelis, hopefully I didn't completely butcher that, he decided he wanted to take advantage of Italy's loose copyright law, and this law stated that any film is allowed to be advertised as a sequel to another film. It was advertised as the sequel to Dawn of the Dead, but it actually had no connection whatsoever. And I love Lucio Fulci's Zombie. I love the zombie effects. I love the gore. And even though it wasn't a direct sequel to Dawn of the Dead, it was still a phenomenal film because it actually mixes the concept of both voodoo zombies and flesh-eating zombies, which has never been done before. I kind of love that, and I thought it was both a fascinating and original approach to the subgenre. As I'm a fan of all things horror, big or small. I basically will watch anything. I'm a self-proclaimed horror historian, so seeing them mix the two is really cool. And I've never seen any of the Lucio Fulci zombie sequels. There was Zombie 3, 1988, Zombie 4, Return of the Zombies, aka The Hanging Woman, that came out in 1973. But known as Zombie 3 in both Italy and Spain, it's really complicated. And there are so many other films that have the working title Zombie, but none of them are really connected to the original zombie concept, which is odd. And of course, in the Living Dead saga, Romero came out with Day of the Dead, which I didn't really like Day of the Dead the first time I saw it. I think the first time I saw it, it was during a movie marathon when they used to show horror films on Sundays on Sci-Fi, on the Sci-Fi channel, like way back in the early 2000s. And like they showed Day of the Dead, but like I guess it was too like slow or talky for me as a child at the time. But I got into it back when COVID hit. Me and my fiance, we kind of rediscovered or just, went through the whole zombie saga from Romero. And it was my first time watching Day of the Dead since I was a child, and I liked it more as an adult. And it's so gory. Tom Savini comes back, and you have Greg Nicotero. It's amazing. The acting is amazing, and it kind of really shows the progression of the zombie apocalypse or outbreak, if you will, and kind of how humanity, just like in The Walking Dead, like, what's worse, humanity or the zombies, And they kind of touched on that a little bit in Dawn of the Dead, too, at the end. But I actually really like Day of the Dead, 1985. Now, now we have the Return of the Living Dead series. If you know Return of the Living Dead, if you're a horror fan and you've never seen Return of the Living Dead, I highly, highly recommend them. They're so fun. While the films are called Return of the Living Dead, they are no way connected to any of George's films. Just like the voodoo zombie films in the 40s had several horror comedies, so did the flesh-eating zombies. Return of the Living Dead pays an homage to Night of the Living Dead, claiming to be part of the same universe and that the events of the film are actually based on a quote-unquote true case, which isn't true at all. The film is basically just a satire, or not really like a spoof, I would just more so say like a horror comedy satire, if that makes sense. These zombies are creative and are reanimated through a government canister that contains a toxic gas that had the ability to reanimate the dead, but also kill a living person and have them return as a zombie. Neat, huh? The fun thing about Return of the Living Dead is the fact that they aren't easily killed like zombie films we know of. You can dismember a zombie or even behead it, but it will still keep coming after you. Also, they talk. How cool is that? They say brains. If you ever wonder where the concept of zombies saying brains came from Return of the Living Dead. At least I believe so. You don't quote me on that, but that's where I discovered brains. It's really cool. I love Return of the Living Dead. It's so funny. I honestly find the zombies in Return of the Living Dead kind of scary because of the fact that you can't really kill them. You could, cut them into itty-bitty little pieces and they will still keep coming. How crazy is that? But zombie films, to conclude, are one of my favorite subgenres of horror. You could do so much. I could be here talking for hours about different zombie films, but if you would like to read the 2-part article I wrote on a brief history of zombies, I kind of went through it a little bit in this podcast, but if you would like to read both parts, I do have them on my Patreon, and I'll link my Patreon below. It's the official Purgatori Horror Patreon, and that's just Purgatory with an I at the end, my name, and horror together. And yeah, come support me on there. That'll just about do it for today's episode. Be sure to give me a like and subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you never miss when I post. This week, I'm actually going to be posting the Witch Week because we did witchcraft films last week. I'm going to be posting it, like I said, the beginning, the same week, even though this episode's coming out today. So you'll have 2 episodes this week. And hopefully I don't get sick again so I don't miss any more episodes because I love doing this. I love talking horror with you guys. I'm very passionate about it. I don't know if you could tell, but yeah. Anyways, please be sure to follow me on Twitter at Purgatori Horror. I'm basically Purgatori Horror on all platforms, except for Instagram. I actually got locked out of my old account, so you can follow me on my new account if you want at XX Purgatori Horror XX. And again, I just want to thank you all so much for all the support and love that you've given me. And, I'm still, as a content creator, I'm still learning. I'm not the best at it, but I'm getting better. And I want to thank you all for being with me throughout this content creation journey. And after Halloween, I'm thinking about launching a mental health podcast. If that would be something you guys would be interested in, please let me know. All right, I'm rambling now. Thank you guys so much for listening. I love you. So long and pleasant screams.